I never thought I'd find myself feeling this way, squeezed into a wedding dress that's pressing uncomfortably on my swollen belly. The twins growing inside me make every breath feel like a chore, with the tight corset pushing against my ribs. I'm sitting at the head table, watching the celebration unfold, yet it feels like I'm barely part of my own wedding. The guests are Dream Caleb and dancing, their laughter and Ruby filling the room, but I feel so distant from it all. My new husband, Austin, is seated nearby, Dream Caleb more and more as the night stretches on. His mother, Clara, is at another table, laughing and chatting with the wealthy women of her circle, her loud, piercing laugh grating on my nerves. My legs are aching, my back is sore, and the babies won't stop moving. It feels so absurd to be here, like a spectator in my own life. Austin and I had begged his family to let us marry before I started showing, but Clara always found a reason to delay. Now, here I am, visibly pregnant for all to see. Overwhelmed, I decide to excuse myself to use the restroom, something I have to do far too often with this difficult pregnancy. As I make my way out of the hall, holding up the long train of my dress, I overhear Clara's voice. "Oh, Nicole, I don't know how I'm supposed to handle this situation," Clara says to one of her elegant friends. My heart sinks as she continues. My Austin has lost his mind bringing home this girl from an orphanage and getting her pregnant with twins. I nearly fainted when I realized we'd have to go through with this wedding. This is such a burden for me to bear. We don't even know if the babies are his. She's clever enough to worm her way into a home in the city, and Austin, bless him, is so naive, saying he loves her. I always dreamed he'd marry Shirley, the architect's charming daughter, not some, well, you understand? Each word feels like a sharp twist of a knife in my heart. I clear my throat, loud enough for Clara to hear. She startles, turning to me with a fake, syrupy smile. "Oh, Evelyn, dear, are you feeling all right? You look pale," she says in a sing-song voice. "You should let the driver take you home. You need your rest. Don't worry, we can finish the party without you." Standing there, feeling hurt and humiliated, I start to wonder how I ended up in this situation, married to a man whose mother openly despises me. Is this really the life I want for myself? For my children? Suddenly, I feel the emptiness inside me more acutely than ever. I grew up without parents, and though I usually manage just fine, in this moment, I deeply wish I had a mother figure to lean on. I remember the kind nurses from the orphanage and how comforting their presence was. I wish one of them were here, offering me a hand to hold, some advice, a reassuring smile. But I know better than to dwell on wishes. I've survived on my own before, and I can do it again if I have to, this time, not just for me, but for my babies. They may not have grandparents or a father who fully cares for them, but they'll have me, and I'll make sure I'm enough for them. Squaring my shoulders, I feel a strength rising within me. It's time for me to be the mother I never had. Lying in bed that night, tears so Caleb my pillow, I can't believe my wedding day turned into such a nightmare. The image of Clara's fake smile and overly sweet tone makes my stomach churn. I left my own wedding reception, surrounded by people who looked down on me. Their judgment hung around me as heavily as the perfume they wore. I hoped Austin would notice I was gone, that he would follow me, concerned and loving. But here I am, alone, while the celebration carries on without the bride. Hours later, the front door opens, and I hear Austin stumbling in at dawn, Caleb of alcohol and expensive perfume. He doesn't even make it to the bed, just collapses on the floor, still in his wedding suit. As his snores fill the room, I feel a wave of nausea that has nothing to do with my pregnancy. This isn't the marriage I dreamed of, not even close. I think back to how beautiful our love seemed in the beginning. Now, that feels like a distant memory, a fairy tale turned sour. I remember bits and pieces of my life before the orphanage, the faint memory of a woman's voice telling me not to cry, saying I'd be living somewhere else. I was 4 years old when I arrived at the orphanage, not tell Kayla much, unsure of who I was or where I came from. My childhood there was calm, neither wonderful nor awful, just routine. Wake up, go to class, go to bed. It was all I knew. The teachers liked me because I was quiet and good at school. After graduating, they helped me get a tiny rundown apartment. I didn't mind. To me, it was my little haven. I had dreams of becoming a doctor, of helping others, and started medical school. That's where I met Austin. He was so different from anyone I'd ever known, charming, lively, and from a world I could barely imagine. When he proposed, I felt like I was living a dream. Now, lying here, listening to his drunken snores on our wedding night, I wonder if I've made a terrible mistake. I think of all the women I saw during my medical rotations, women hurt and broken by men who promised to love them. Is that what my future holds? No, I tell myself firmly. I won't let that happen. I've survived alone before, and I can do it again if I have to. My babies deserve better, and so do I. As the first rays of morning light filter through the window, I make a quiet promise to myself. I'll finish my degree, become a doctor, and create a life where I'm respected and valued. If Austin wants to be part of that life, he'll have to earn it. He'll have to prove he's worthy of this family, and if he can't, I know I've faced tougher challenges before. Placing my hand on my swollen belly, I feel the twins moving inside. We'll be okay, I whisper, and for the first time, I genuinely believe it. I never thought my life would end up here. I'm work Caleb part-time at a pharmacy. Barely ma Caleb ends meet, a far cry from my earlier dreams. Back then, life was simpler. I was known for my sweet smile and bouncing curls that seemed to catch the attention of every boy. But I wasn't in a rush to fall in love. Growing up in the orphanage had shown me the dangers of love taken too lightly. I'd seen too many girls end up heartbroken, pulled into bad choices involving drugs, alcohol, or unhealthy relationships. So, I made a promise to myself. Career first, marriage later. But the heart doesn't always follow logical plans. It was just another day at the hospital, assisting a patient after surgery, when I first noticed him. Austin caught my attention immediately. A young man with deep, dark eyes, as captivating as midnight. He was polite and charming, and his quick smile made my cheeks flush. It started so simply, with friendship and a wink here, a compliment there. Before I even realized it, friendship grew into love. Austin came from a world I could hardly imagine. His family was wealthy, his mother, Clara, was a high-society businesswoman, and his father held a prominent position in the city administration. At first, I felt out of place in his world, but I was honest about my background as an orphan and my lack of family wealth. Austin, bless him, respected my resilience and independence. He'd often tell me how much he admired my determination, how amazing he thought I was for pushing through on my own to study and work. He once confessed that he sometimes felt stifled by his parents' constant support, whereas I had faced life's challenges alone. You think independence is easy? I told him once. It's terrifying when you don't have anyone to lean on. Our relationship blossomed, and before I knew it, all my old rules about love and career flew out the window. Austin was gentle, caring, and he promised we'd always be together. I believed him wholeheartedly, convinced that I'd found my happy ending, like the romantic stories I'd secretly read in the orphanage. Then everything changed. A few months into our relationship, I started feeling different, always exhausted, prone to sudden tears, my body acting unpredictably. My periods had become irregular, and eventually I took a pregnancy test. When those 3 lines appeared, my heart sank. It felt like the ground had vanished beneath my feet. We were just beginning our journey, and now there was a baby on the way. Our plans, which had once been about beaches and adventures, now faced the reality of cribs and diapers. I was still in school, still building my future. How were we supposed to raise a child when we barely knew what we wanted for ourselves? I kept the news to myself for a while, terrified of how to tell Austin. Each day, my anxiety grew until I realized I couldn't hide it any longer. My heart pounded as I approached him, trying to steady my voice. "Honey, I need to go to the doctor tomorrow. Would you come with me? I really need your support." Austin looked at me with immediate worry and agreed without hesitation, asked Caleb if I was okay. I gave him a vague answer, saying we'd find out more soon. The next day, my nerves were on edge as we entered the ultrasound room. My palms were sweaty, my stomach in knots. The news was even more surprising than I'd anticipated. I wasn't just pregnant, I was carrying twins. The doctor's cheerful congratulations contrasted sharply with Austin's stunned expression. On the drive home, Austin couldn't stop pacing in the small apartment, his words spilling out faster than I could process. "How could this happen?" he demanded, his face tense. "I'm going to be a doctor. I should have been smarter about this. How am I supposed to tell my parents?" His words struck me hard, like stones, each one Caleb me feel smaller. He kept pointing out how his tiny apartment wasn't even big enough for the two of us, let alone for twins. He reminded me that his father had promised him a luxury apartment as a wedding gift, but now who knew how his parents would react? I felt overwhelmed, tears streaming down my face as I told him I was just as unprepared as he was. We were young, still students, and now we were going to be parents. I was scared, but the tone in his voice hurt. Finally, I snapped. "Don't act like this is my fault," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "You were there, too. I didn't make these babies on my own." My voice cracked, but I stood my ground, finally voicing my biggest fear. "Are you going to leave me now?" As I waited for his response, it felt like the weight of my entire future was hanging in the air. Would he stand by me, or would I be left to face this alone, just as I'd always feared? His hug should have reassured me, but his words fell flat. He muttered an apology, saying the babies were his responsibility too, and that we needed to inform his parents and plan a wedding. He promised we'd figure it out, though it was clear he didn't know how. When we finally met with his parents, their reaction was icy and distant. Austin tried to explain gently, confessing that we were in love and expecting twins. He begged them to understand, hoping they'd offer some form of support. Clara, however, was less than thrilled. Her chilly gaze, her disappointed words, made it clear that, to her, I was just an unwelcome addition to their family, a poor girl from an orphanage who had somehow managed to entangle her son. Now, as I lie here, I realize my life is at a crossroads. I have choices to make and strength I didn't know I'd need. I'm determined to finish my degree, become a doctor, and create a life where I'm valued and respected. Whether Austin stays by my side or not, I'll keep moving forward. I owe it to myself and to my babies to be the strong, dependable mother they'll need. Austin, and I shared the news with his parents. I watched as Clara clutched her chest like she'd been struck, her face twisted in shock. His father's reaction was quieter, but his disapproving frown made his disappointment just as clear. What followed was a long, grueling interrogation, as if they were dissecting every aspect of my life. With each question, I could feel myself shrink Caleb in their eyes. Not only was I pregnant with twins, but I was also an orphan with no family or wealth. In their world, I was far from the perfect match for their only son. But they had no choice. I was the woman Austin loved, and they had to accept me as his bride. They decided that Austin and I would move into their mansion. My tiny apartment would be rented out, and they reasoned that the mansion at least had space for the children to play. My life shifted quickly, from work Caleb part-time at the pharmacy to adjusting to life in their grand home. I felt grateful they allowed me to finish my studies, though they were firm that I'd no longer work in a shop. With my belly growing as big as a watermelon, I took my final exams, determined to complete my education. Growing up, I'd always pictured my wedding as a magical day. I'd imagined dancing with the man I loved, trying on beautiful dresses, choosing veils and flowers, a celebration of love and commitment. But Clara, Austin's mother, had other plans. She delayed the wedding 4 separate times, each time with a new excuse. First, she was unwell. Then, it was her blood pressure, followed by work conflicts, or the timing not being appropriate. I started to suspect her delays were intentional, as if she wanted me to walk down the aisle visibly pregnant and far from beautiful, Caleb a spectacle of me in front of their high society guests. Clara was a formidable woman, a force in both her family and their business. No one dared question her, and kindness was something she seemed to lack entirely. Each night, as I lay in bed, my hands resting on my growing belly, I wondered what kind of family I had married into. Was this the life I wanted for my children? But then, I'd feel a tiny kick, reminding me that these little lives needed me to be strong. I hadn't chosen this exact path, but I was determined to face it for them and for myself. Life in the Clara mansion was tense. Clara wore a polished smile whenever others were around, but her true nature emerged whenever she pulled Austin into the study after he returned from work. "Darling," she'd coo in a voice dripping with fake sweetness, "you wouldn't believe what your fiancé did today. She ruined your silk shirt, washed it all wrong, and acts like she owns the place. Are you sure she's the right one for you? You've only known her a short while, and already she's carrying twins. Are you certain they're yours? After all, we've never had twins in the family. It's genetic, you know." Her words were like stabs to my heart. She'd go on, saying, "Why burden yourself with this? She's just an ordinary girl, not even that bright, and she hasn't finished school. Can you imagine? 3 babies crying all the time. It would drive anyone mad. You're young, Austin, with your whole life ahead of you. Are you really ready to sacrifice it all for this girl?" Austin, clearly torn, would defend me, telling her that he loved me and reminding her that it would be cruel to abandon his pregnant fiancée. He admitted that he was nervous about fatherhood and uncertain about the changes ahead, but he felt he had to take responsibility. Clara's sugary smile would only grow more exaggerated. "Of course, darling. We don't have to throw Evelyn out. I just have another idea." After these talks, Austin would emerge from the study tense and frustrated. It was clear he wasn't thrilled about becoming a father so soon, feeling that his life and freedom were slipping away. Even the wedding felt like a hollow, obligatory ritual rather than a rubious celebration. I remember standing there, watching Austin mutter his vows, his hands trembling as he slipped the ring on my finger. The moment I dreamed of since I was a child felt empty, like a poorly staged play. After the ceremony, he disappeared into the celebration, while I quietly slipped away, too tired and heartbroken to pretend. Where was the man who once promised me a life full of love and warmth? It felt like our unplanned pregnancy had stripped away every ounce of affection between us. Weeks passed, and there was no mention of a honeymoon. Austin's parents tightly controlled every wedding gift, every penny, money I hadn't even seen. We started arguing over the smallest things. He was annoyed by my restlessness at night, even complaining that my tossing and turning kept him awake. Before I knew it, he had moved to another room, each step tearing my heart a little more. Nights were the hardest. I missed him, craved even a small sign of love or comfort, especially when fear crept in, when thoughts of childbirth overwhelmed me. I worried about the possibility of needing a C-section, about something going wrong with the babies. Here I was, still a student, about to become a mother to twins, and I felt utterly alone. When Austin finally told his parents about the pregnancy, it was as if a chill had descended on the house. Clara tried to conceal her disappointment, but her disapproval was clear in her eyes. Austin had insisted we get married, to make things right, to give our children a proper family. But even after we'd exchanged vows, I felt no closer to him, no more secure. Our marriage quickly began to feel like an arrangement of convenience rather than the loving partnership I'd envisioned. Clara watched my every move, scrutinizing me as if waiting for me to slip up. She made it clear that in her eyes, I was an unworthy addition to their family, a poor girl with no roots and no social standing. 3 weeks later, the gap between Austin and me had only widened. He spent his time in his parents' study or out of the house, while I was left alone in my room, feeling increasingly isolated. The days passed in a blur of arguments, sleepless nights, and heartache. I missed the kind, loving Austin I'd fallen in love with, the man who'd once told me I was the strongest person he knew. Now he was a stranger, distant and cold, lost in his own resentment. At night, I lay awake, my hands on my belly, whispering to the twins, promising them that I'd protect them and give them a life filled with love, even if that meant doing it alone. I was scared, yes, but more than that, I was determined. Determined to finish my degree, to become a doctor, and to build a future where my children and I would be valued and respected. If Austin wanted to be a part of that future, He'd have to prove himself worthy. If not, I knew I had the strength to face whatever came next, just like I always had. This might not have been the life I planned, but I was ready to face it, for myself and for the little lives depending on me. I have no one to turn to, no one to confide in, and no shoulder to lean on. I try to calm myself, hoping that Austin will fall in love with our babies the moment he holds them. But even that hope feels fragile, like it could crumble at any moment. Then, out of nowhere, Austin drops another bombshell. He's leaving for a 5-week business trip. He says it's important, like it's no big deal, but the words hit me hard. Tears fill my eyes as I beg him to reconsider. How can he leave me now, especially when I'm already struggling to feel welcome in his family's home? His mother sees me as a burden, and his father barely acknowledges me. And now he's leaving. What if the babies come early? I've read that it's common with twins. What am I supposed to do if I'm alone? The doctors still aren't sure if I'll need a C-section. I beg him to stay, to not leave me feeling so vulnerable and scared. But he just looks irritated, brushing off my concerns as silly. He tells me to stop reading those books and reminds me I still have a month to go. "You're not alone," he says flatly. "My parents will take you to the hospital if anything happens." He claims he's doing this for us, to earn money for the family, but his tone is that of someone who's annoyed and self-centered. He says he needs to focus on his career now to secure our future. But as I listen, a cold realization settles over me. This isn't the man I thought I knew, and this isn't the life I envisioned for myself or my children. I place my hand on my belly, feeling the twins move, and make a silent promise. I may feel alone in this marriage, but I won't be alone in motherhood. These babies are my family now, and I'll do whatever it takes to give them the love and security they deserve. Lying in this cold hospital bed, I've never felt so utterly alone in my life. The pain in my abdomen has eased a little, but the ache in my heart feels endless, like it's trying to swallow me whole. Just weeks ago, I was living in my mother-in-law's mansion, a place that felt more like a fancy prison than a home. Every part of my day was controlled, my needs and opinions brushed aside, like I was invisible to them. I can't forget that night. The pain hit me suddenly, like a train, gripping my belly with contractions that left me gasping. Desperate, I stumbled to Clara's room, barely able to call for help. She looked annoyed, as if I were causing trouble on purpose. She accused me of overreacting, saying, "Stop screaming like a child. Be a real woman." Her words stung more than the physical pain I was feeling. Finally, she called an ambulance, but the coldness in her voice made me feel so small and alone. Now I lie here in the hospital, hooked up to IVs, each hour a battle to keep my babies safe. The doctors say I need to stay here until the birth to avoid more complications. I feel desperate, trying to reach Austin, hoping he'll come back to support me. But his phone is always off and Clara refuses to answer my calls. A terrible thought creeps into my mind. Did they plan this? Did they really leave me here to fend for myself? I don't even have anyone to bring me essentials. Thankfully, I saved a little money from renting out my apartment, but it's barely enough for a week or two, let alone for anything extra if I need more care. Lying here, listening to the beeping of the monitors, I can't help but think about the girls I knew back in the orphanage. So many of them ended up in situations like this, alone, scared, with no one to help them. I always thought I'd be different, that I'd find love, build a family of my own. Yet here I am, married but feeling lonelier than ever. But as I feel a gentle flutter in my belly, a reminder of the little lives growing inside me, I gather my strength. These babies are my family now, and I will be the mother they deserve. Even if I have to do it alone, I won't let them feel the loneliness I grew up with. This may not be the life I imagined, but it's mine, and I refuse to let it break me. Days pass in a fog of quiet loneliness. No visitors, no calls, just endless silence. The walls of my hospital room feel like they're closing in, pressing on me until a terrible thought begins to take root. Could it be that Austin has truly abandoned me? Has he changed his number, cut off all contact? It seems impossible, yet here I am, alone and unable to reach him. I bury my face in my pillow, My tears sow a Caleb through the thin fabric. My nerves are frayed, and hope feels like it's slipping away. Some of the other patients, kind souls, try to lift my spirits. They offer me little gifts, like shared fruit and warm smiles. And then there's Rubismeyer, a nurse's aide with a heart of gold. She seems to understand my loneliness and tries to comfort me. She brings homemade meals that taste like heaven compared to the bland hospital food, and her small acts of kindness keep me going. But even her warmth can't fill the ache in my heart. I'm about to give birth, and my husband is nowhere to be found. One day, in sheer desperation, I open up to Rubis. I tell her about Austin, about my fears, about how I'm terrified that something terrible has happened to him. Why has he vanished? I whisper, barely able to get the words out. We're married, aren't we? He wouldn't just leave me here forever, would he? The words taste bitter as I voice my deepest fears. What if he's truly abandoned me? Seeing my distress, Rubis agrees to help. I hand her a note, begging her to deliver it to his address. Please, I say, almost pleading. I just need to know. I think I'll lose my mind if I don't get some answers. Rubis promises to deliver the note after her next shift, and I cling to that promise, torn between hope and dread. When Rubis returns the next day, her face is pale, and her news feels like a blow to my heart. She tells me that she saw Austin, alive and well, leaving the mansion with another woman. She approached him, offering my note, but he looked at her with confusion, then glanced at the woman beside him, a woman in a streak-Caleb blue dress. I think you have the wrong address, he told Rubis, brushing her off. I don't know anyone named Evelyn. He didn't even read the note. The words pierced through me like shards of ice. Austin has not only left me, he's erased me. He's gone from my life, pretending I don't even exist. As I lie back on my hospital bed, tears streaming down my face, I realize that I truly am alone in this. I have no one but myself, but I also have these precious little lives inside me. And for them, I will be strong. He just tore it up and threw it away, Rubis told me, her voice soft but her words like knives cutting into my heart. He's abandoned you, she added gently, though the reality felt harsher than anything I'd ever faced. As her words sank in, it was like a balloon of pain burst inside me. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably, and then suddenly, I felt a rush of water between my legs. Rubis' eyes widened. Your water's broken, she shouted, rushing to get the doctor. Hold on, I'll be right back, she assured me. In that moment, as the first contraction hit, I realized this was it. I was about to become a mother, alone, heartbroken, yet determined. My babies were all I had now, and I promised myself right then that I would give them all the love and security that their father had refused to give us. This wasn't the beginning I had dreamed of, but it was ours, and I was ready to face whatever came next for my children's sake. I never imagined I'd find myself here, cradling my newborn twins, feeling a whirlwind of emotions, overwhelming love for these precious lives, mixed with the deep ache of abandonment. The birth, thankfully, went smoothly, and I didn't need a C-section. But as I looked down at my beautiful babies, reality hit hard. I couldn't even hold both of them at once, and my voice cracked as I whispered, I don't even have a stroller. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I felt the weight of my situation press down on me. Rubis, my angel in this dark time, sat beside me, trying to comfort me. She assured me everything would be okay, and even mentioned her brother, Nathan, who might bring flowers and balloons to celebrate. You're not alone, she said, and those words felt like a lifeline. She told me about Nathan, a kind soul who had once saved a child from being hit by a truck, injuring his leg in the process. Rubis promised to contact City Hall to see if they could help me with a bigger apartment or financial aid. Her words were meant to be reassuring, but they only reminded me of how truly alone I was. On the day of my discharge, my hospital roommates helped me get ready, though it felt strange to put on makeup when my world had fallen apart. Even officials from City Hall showed up to take photos for their records. Nathan, Rubis' brother, was waiting downstairs. He was tall and friendly, with a noticeable limp, and he handed me flowers before giving me a reassuring hug, whispering words of encouragement. Just then, a local TV crew appeared, Luke Caleb, for heartwarming stories about new mothers. They asked about my experiences, and I forced a smile, trying to look composed as they interviewed me about my first impressions as a mother. After the whirlwind of cameras and questions, Rubus and Nathan helped me into a taxi, and we drove to my tiny apartment. When I finally stepped inside, a deep sigh escaped me, followed quickly by more tears. How was I supposed to manage twins alone, without even a crib or stroller? But beneath the fear and uncertainty, a fierce determination grew within me. I was angry at Austin for discarding me, for Caleb me feel like I wasn't good enough. But in that moment, I made a vow to myself and my babies. We would survive, and we would thrive. We didn't need Austin or his family. I promised myself I'd never ask them for a penny. We'd make it on our own, no matter what. Luke Caleb at my sleeping babies. I felt a strength I didn't know I had. We may be starting with nothing, but we had each other, and that was everything. Meanwhile, back in the luxurious Clara mansion, the atmosphere was charged. The family had just seen a local news story featuring a brave new mother of twins, me. They watched as I appeared on the screen, being greeted by a man with a noticeable limp. The segment focused on me and my babies, capturing the moment I stepped out of the hospital. Clara's sharp voice cut through the room, her tone filled with disdain. "See," she sneered. "This proves everything I suspected, that the twins aren't Austin's." The real father finally showed up. Austin, caught between his love for me and his mother's fierce influence, looked torn. "Maybe Evelyn just needed help," he suggested, his voice soft and uncertain. "We made a mistake, Mom. We shouldn't have left her and the kids." I still love her," he admitted, guilt and regret etched on his face. "And we're still married, after all." Clara's anger flared as she scolded him for being naive. "Those twins aren't welcome here. We don't need strangers' children in our home," she insisted, her smile cruel. She even mentioned that she'd heard I was Caleb government assistance. "Don't worry," she said with a smirk. "Your father's connections in City Hall will make sure she doesn't get public housing." She almost seemed pleased as she declared, "This proves what I knew all along. She's nothing but a deceitful orphan." Austin, as always, remained swayed by his mother's strong personality. Years of strict, controlling parenting had left him unable to stand up for himself, let alone defend me. Even though he felt guilt and regret, he lacked the courage to go against his mother's wishes, still clinging to the hope that I might one day come back. But fate had its own plans. One day, as Clara began a critical business presentation in front of high-powered executives, a large screen behind her glitched. Instead of her polished slides, the screen suddenly displayed a news replay. And right there, as clear as day, was the story of me, standing proudly with my newborn twins, being embraced by a kind stranger with a limp. As the presentation continued, Clara was mortified. The entire room had seen the news clip of Evelyn and her twins, with Nathan helping her at the hospital. Many people recognized Evelyn as Austin's wife, and confusion spread through the audience. Why wasn't Austin by her side? Who was this other man, and what did this have to do with Clara's business? Realizing the error, Clara quickly switched back to her slides, stammering an apology, but it was too late. The room was buzzing with whispers. One businessman, Caleb, could hardly keep his thoughts in check. He recognized the man in the video. Nathan was the same person who had once saved his son's life. A year ago, Caleb's 8-year-old son had been in a traffic accident, and Nathan had pulled him to safety. Though Caleb had been out of town at the time, he'd watched the intersection footage to find out who had saved his son. Nathan's face was unforgettable, but he had never learned his identity since Nathan left before paramedics arrived, refusing even help for his injuries. Eager to thank Nathan, Caleb immediately used his connections to learn more. What he found stunned him. Clara's son had abandoned his wife and children, leaving Evelyn alone to face motherhood. Determined to help, Caleb found Evelyn's address and, knowing she had young children, bought diapers and toys to bring with him. When Caleb arrived at Evelyn's door, she opened it, Luke Caleb tired and worn. Her pale face reflected exhaustion, but when she saw Caleb, she quickly masked her surprise. The memory of Austin's departure came rushing back, filling her with a mix of hope and dread, but she could tell this visitor was someone different. Apologizing, she hurriedly explained, "I need to keep this short. The twins need feeding." Just as she spoke, the babies began fussing, their cries a reminder of her chaotic days. Embarrassed, she added, "And I think my stew is burning. It's been a rough day." Caleb introduced himself and handed her the bags, as Caleb about Nathan, the man who had helped her. Overwhelmed, Evelyn felt a mixture of gratitude for Nathan, shame over her situation, and a small spark of hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Nathan is Rubus's brother, the nurse's aide who took care of me at the hospital. They've been so kind to me. I don't know what I would have done without them." Bitterness crept in as she added, "My husband abandoned us. But I'll survive. God will judge him, and his mother, too." Evelyn scribbled down Rubus's contact information and handed it to Caleb, bringing Caleb back tears. "They're doing everything they can to help. I can't even take the babies for a walk. I don't have a stroller." Surrounded by the mess of new motherhood and heartbreak, she felt incredibly small. Yet as she looked at this stranger's kind face, a glimmer of hope began to grow. Maybe, just maybe, there were still good people out there who cared about a struggling mother and her twins. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of belief that they might make it after all. Caleb thanked her for Nathan's information and quickly reached out to him. When they met, Caleb explained how he recognized Nathan from the news segment and how grateful he was for the man who had saved his son. Nathan, in turn, shared his story with Caleb. After injuring his leg during the accident, he had struggled to find decent work, but he and his sister Rubus had done their best to support Evelyn. Caleb was moved, impressed by Nathan's selflessness and strength, despite his own challenges. Without hesitation, Caleb offered Nathan a job at his company, starting as an assistant manager with a good salary and flexible hours. He assured Nathan that he'd also handle the stroller situation for Evelyn, a small gesture but one he felt was important. Nathan's eyes lit up, and he eagerly accepted, promising to work hard and make the most of the opportunity. "Rubus will be thrilled," he added. "She's always worried about me finding steady work." For Evelyn, life seemed to turn around in an instant. One moment, she'd felt overwhelmed by despair, and the next, a lifeline appeared through Nathan and Caleb. Nathan quickly rose through the ranks at Caleb's company, proving himself as an exceptional worker, and soon became the general manager. His career flourished, and Evelyn felt both proud and deeply grateful for the new path he'd found. True to his word, Caleb didn't forget about the twins. He arranged for a beautiful stroller to be delivered to Evelyn, elegant and sturdy, something she could never have afforded on her own. The sight of it brought tears to her eyes, a small symbol of the kindness still present in the world. With the stroller, Evelyn could finally take the twins out for fresh air. Their walks became a ruby, with the babies sleeping peacefully as she strolled down the streets, their cheeks rosy and their appetites growing with each outing. And as for Nathan and Evelyn, they grew incredibly close. He became like an unofficial member of their little family, always there to lend a helping hand and bringing a sense of comfort that Evelyn had longed for. Back at the Clara mansion, however, chaos brewed. News of Evelyn's new life had reached Clara and Austin, and rumors were spreading. Just as Clara was preparing to deliver a major business presentation in front of high-level executives, a technical glitch hit the large screen behind her. Instead of her carefully crafted slides, a video of Evelyn and her twins appeared on the screen, with Nathan by her side, a look of genuine care and warmth on his face. Clara's jaw dropped as the audience stared in shock. The unexpected turn of events left Clara exposed, her attempt to hide and erase Evelyn now unraveling for everyone to see. "I never thought I'd feel love like this again. Nathan is truly a kindred spirit, and sometimes I wonder if this is what real love feels like." The pain of Austin's betrayal has faded, like an old photograph losing its color. "Caleb back, I see that Austin and I were never right for each other. What we had was more passion than love, a temporary connection rather than a lasting bond. I don't regret the divorce anymore. Life with his controlling mother would never have made me happy. With the help of Nathan and his sister, Ruby, I was finally able to move into a 4-bedroom apartment, a space big enough for our growing family. Time has flown by, and before I knew it, the twins started daycare, giving me the chance to return to university. I even began an internship on the same ward where I gave birth, bringing my journey full circle. Juggling motherhood, studies, and work has been a challenge, but I've found a rhythm, a way to manage it all. Through every step, Nathan has been my rock, bringing a calm and peace to my life that I never thought possible. Watching the children call him Papa, reaching out their little hands to him, fills my heart with a happiness that runs deep. As I look at my little family, I realize life works in mysterious ways. From the darkest moments of despair, I found a happiness I never thought I'd have. It's not the life I planned, but it's filled with love, laughter, and second chances. And truly, I wouldn't change a thing. Meanwhile, things took a dark turn in the once grand Clara household. Clara, my former mother-in-law, lost her job, and her husband suffered severe financial losses, pushing the family business to the brink of collapse. Austin, unable to cope, turned to drink Caleb, blaming his mother for every bad decision that had brought his life to this point. Memories of me haunted him, filling him with guilt and regret. He even tried calling me, hoping for a second chance, but I ignored his calls or hung up, remembering how he'd abandoned me in my time of need. Austin's life spiraled further, with his addiction to gambling draining the last remnants of his family's wealth. He turned to shallow relationships, hiring women to fill the void, but none could offer the warmth and love he had once felt with me. Watching her son's downfall, Clara's anger only grew. Desperate and deluded, she even suggested to Austin that they take the children away from me, insisting they belonged with their father. Austin, eager for redemption, agreed, and soon, I found myself in court, fighting for my right to live peacefully with my children. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Here were the very people who once claimed the twins weren't family, now demanding custody. I stood before the judge, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. Austin is not the father, I declared, each word filled with the truth. Please, just let us live in peace. Clara's voice cut through the courtroom, shrill and accusing, claiming I was keeping the children from their father out of spite. She even threatened genetic testing. But I held firm, refusing to let her manipulate us. You have no right, I told her, my voice low and resolute. You abandoned us when we needed you most. Let us live our lives in peace. Thanks to the skillful work of the lawyer Nathan had hired, the court ruled in my favor. As Clara and Austin left, a sense of relief washed over me. Austin tried to stop me as I left the courtroom, grabbing my arm, but I shook him off, feeling nothing but disgust. He begged for forgiveness, saying he still loved me, but I looked at him, my gaze unwavering. You may not be able to forget me, I said coldly, but I have no desire to remember you. Do you understand? Years of hurt and anger finally released as I continued. You were never a husband or father, just a child following his mother's orders. With unexpected clarity, I added, and for that, I thank you. If you hadn't abandoned me, I might never have met the man who truly values me. I straightened my shoulders, feeling stronger than I had in years. This isn't goodbye, Austin. It's farewell forever. With that, I walked away, stepping into the sunlight, finally able to breathe freely. For the first time in a long time, the future felt bright, full of promise. In the weeks that followed, Austin's life deteriorated even further. His gambling debts piled up, and he became entangled with dangerous loan sharks, mortgaging everything he had left. Clara, aged and bitter, watched helplessly as her son's life crumbled. Desperate, she concocted a scheme to kidnap my children, believing it would somehow bring her son peace. She whispered her plan to the criminals, directing them to me and the twins. The fear that followed was something I could never have imagined. One moment, I was at the park, watching the twins play, their laughter a balm to my soul. The next, they were gone, snatched by men in hoodies who disappeared with my babies. The sound of the tires screeching away as I tried to run after them haunts me to this day. I screamed for help until my voice was raw, and the world turned into a blur of faces and sirens. At the hospital, sedatives dulled the edges of my terror, but I remained alert, clinging to Nathan like a lifeline. "Find them," I begged, my voice Caleb. "I can't live without them." When the detective arrived, I forced myself to focus, replaying every detail I could remember. By some miracle, I recalled part of the car's license plate, a sliver of hope in a world that felt shattered. As the search continued, I refused to collapse. I was a mother, and I would not give up. I turned to Nathan, pleading with him to take me to the last place they were seen. Though he tried to convince me to stay safe, he finally gave in, seeing the fierce determination in my eyes. We drove from village to village, showing pictures of the twins, asked Caleb if anyone had seen them. Just as darkness began to fall, a lead emerged. A forest ranger mentioned a remote cabin in the swamp, a known hideout. We raced there, hope and fear clashing inside me. As we approached, we saw a faint light through a small window. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and a scuffle broke out. The ranger subdued one of the men, and inside, we found my terrified children. The man who claimed to have saved them from criminals turned out to be their rescuer, guiding the authorities to the real culprits. With the children safe, I felt an overwhelming wave of relief as I held them close, my heart finally at peace. In the end, the investigation revealed Clara's twisted involvement. She was sent to a mental institution, her obsession consuming her mind, while Austin's life spiraled further as he lost everything. His father passed away, the family business collapsed, and Austin was left with nothing but his regrets. At home, I watched my children sleep, finally safe. Though the fear still lingered, I promised myself to cherish every moment with them, to never take our time together for granted. From the nightmare, I found strength, resilience, and a deep love for my little family. One day, as we gathered around the dinner table, I looked at Nathan with gratitude. He had become my rock, my partner, and the father my children needed. We invited Ethan, the man who had helped rescue the twins, into our home as a thank you. He shared stories of his life, and when Nathan offered him a job as our caretaker, Ethan humbly accepted, becoming part of our little family. Life had come full circle in ways I never could have imagined. Surrounded by my children, my partner, and new friends, I felt a deep peace. Watching the twins play, hearing them call me mommy, filled me with a ruby I once thought lost. From the depths of despair, I had found love, laughter, and a new beginning. Sometimes the most beautiful things come from the darkest moments, and in our journey, we didn't just survive, we thrived. And for those who listened to our story, thank you for being part of our journey. If our story touched you, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel.